Hello again and welcome back. My name is Kimberly. I am the owner of So Sassy Stitcher in Northwest Arkansas. I am working on my Mountain Meadow block of the month that I got from the Stitch and Snip in Garden Valley, Idaho. I am on month 4 for this guy, and I had a lot of changes for this one. So I'm just gonna walk you through the cutting changes that I did. There are half square triangles, there are flying geese on this one, and that's the majority of this one. We also have 1/4 square triangle for the spacer that we have, and so I tried a new method for that. I'm going to walk you guys through that one. Not sure if I will continue doing that one, but let me walk you through this. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see a little bit better. All right, for fabric 1, we are doing half square triangles with these guys. So the 4 7/8 squares, I bumped up to 5, gives me just that little bit of wiggle room, and I am not cutting them diagonally. I'm leaving them square at this point. The 4.5-inch squares get to stay. Fabric 2, I'm not doing anything different. Fabric 3, I am not doing anything different. Fabric 4, that is also going to be a half square triangle. So for the 4 7/8, I'm going to bump that up to 5, and I'm going to leave that square intact. I'm not going to cut it. For the 8 1 3/4 inch squares for the 4B, I am cutting a single 6-inch square for that, and that is going to be one of my flying geese. For the 3x3 squares, that's for the border, that's gonna stay. And that just gets put aside with all the other border squares. Fabric 9, again, this is for a half square triangle. So that 2 7/8, I'm gonna bump up to 3 inches. The 2.5 by 4.5 rectangle, I am changing to a 5.5-inch square. Then the 8 2.5-inch squares, I'm making a 7-inch square. So for fabric 9, I'm going to have 4 3-inch squares left intact. I'm going to have 1 5.5-inch square and 1 7-inch square. Fabric 10 gets to stay. Fabric 12, okay, here, I changed the 8 3/4 inch square to just a 4.5-inch strip. This is for our 1/4 square triangle, and I'll explain this one in a minute. You may choose to go ahead and keep it as that 8 3/4 inch square, but I'll show you what I did. The unfortunate thing is the way that they're telling you to do it, you're basically creating 2 1/4 square triangles when you only need 1. And then the single 3x3 square you get to keep. That's for the spacer. The 2 1/8 square is for 4B is a half square triangle. So I'm going to bump that up to 2 1/4 inches, and I'm going to leave it intact as a square. I'm not going to cut it diagonally. The 1 3/4 by 3-inch rectangles, I'm going to change. Instead of doing 4 of those, I'm going to do 1 single 4.5-inch square. And then the 1 3/4 inch squares, 4 of them get to stay. Fabric 13 gets to stay. Fabric 17, with the 8 3/4 inch square, I'm going to cut that 4.5-inch strip, and I'll walk you through that one. That's for our half square triangle, or 1/4 square triangle, excuse me. Fabric 18, instead of the 8 2.5-inch squares, I'm doing a single 7-inch square. Fabric 21, the 2 1/8 squares is for a half square triangle, so I'm going to bump that up to 2 1/4 inch. And then the rectangle, I am making a single 4.5-inch square. And then the 1 3/4 inch squares, I am making a 6-inch square out of that one. Fabric 22, those 3 3/8 squares is a half square triangle. I'm going to bump that up to 3.5. The 3x3 squares get to stay. I am going to do 4 more additional 3-inch squares. So I'm bumping up that 2 7/8 to 3 inches. So I'm going to have a total of 9 3-inch squares for fabric 22. So that 4 of them can go towards those half square triangles. And then the rectangle is going to become a 5.5-inch square. And then I'm going to keep my 2.5-inch squares, the 4 of them. And then the last one, fabric 24, is for half square triangle. So I'm going to bump that up to 3.5 inches, leaving that intact. Okay. Now, from there, I am going to put together for my flying geese, and each set of my flying geese, I'm doing it the Eleanor Burns method, gives me 4 flying geese, which is what I need. So it's perfect. Okay. So I'm going to use the 5.5 and 7-inch blocks for 9 and 22 and 18 and 9. Okay, so the 9-inch is going to be, or the fabric number 9, goodness, my brain doesn't want to work. Fabric number 9 is going to be the 7-inch block. Fabric 22 is going to be the 5.5-inch block. For fabric 18, that's going to be the 7-inch. Fabric 9 is going to go on top of that. That's a 5.5. Then we're going to move down to our smaller blocks. Fabric 21 is going to be a 6-inch block. Fabric 12 is going to go on top of that. It's a 4.5-inch. Fabric 4 is going to be a 6-inch block. On top of that is going to be a 21, fabric 21, which is a 4.5-inch block. Okay, I've got all these measurements written down there. This, like, I had to really wrap my head around this, okay, because I did change it up so much and I wanted to make sure that I had everything correct and my sizes correct. Okay, so then I'm going to do my half square triangles, making sure that I have the correct combination of fabrics. Okay, so you can see that I left my squares intact for this. For this one, I use a 1/4 inch diagonal piece. So I just lay this across like this, and then I'm going to mark on either side of that, and then I stitch on those lines. Then from there, I can take my ruler and just cut down that center diagonally like this. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square up ruler, okay, and I'm going to zoom you out just a little bit here. I'm going to take that square up ruler. These guys are going to be a 4.5 inch. So I'm going to put this 4.5 inch dotted line right on my stitch line. Just like that. I've got a little bit of extra on both sides, and that gets trimmed up just like that. Okay, so that's gonna happen with both of these. I can do my little trim up my tails so that when I open it up, I am not going to have any tails sticking out that I then have to trim up later. So I'm just going to do some quick little 45-degree cuts just like this, and then I can open those and iron them up, and they're going to be just the right size for my and for these, normally I've got purple on the back, okay? Normally I would iron towards that darker fabric, but because of the way I'm having things mesh together on this one and because of my flying geese, I'm actually gonna iron these towards the light on this so that I get those nice nesting seams. Okay, then my flying geese. So we talked about having the bigger fabric, smaller fabric, okay? So what I want is, again, I want it centered as best as possible on the bigger one. I'm gonna take my little 1/4 inch guy and I'm gonna put it diagonally. I'm gonna mark either side and then I'm gonna stitch down that side. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this guy and I'm going to cut it diagonally, just like that. And then you can see when I open these up, I have kind of this wonky pattern. And what I'm gonna do is this guy gets ironed to the bigger one, which is opposite of what we would normally do, but that's the way that it's gonna work, so that when your flying geese come out, it lays nicely towards the wings, okay? So this is your base, these are your wings, okay? The bigger piece ends up being your triangular wings on that flying geese, okay? So then once we have these ironed open, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this over so that it is opposite of what I have on the bottom. And I'm gonna have this lay just like this. And then I'm gonna turn it like this, and I'm gonna lay this down, and I'm gonna mark either side here, and I'm gonna stitch along those. Then I open it up, okay? So then you end up with something that looks like this. And you can see that I have a flying geese here that I then use my flying geese rulers, okay, to trim up. So it'll do like that. And then I get 4 of them. This would be 2, and then my other half gets me the other 2. So I get 4 out of a 6-inch square, or a 7-inch square and a 5.5-inch square, or a 6-inch and a 4.5-inch. So it just depends on what that finished size is going to be. Okay, this one I believe is the 1.5 by 3 finished square is what this is going to be. So I'm going to need this size, and I'm going to need this 2 by 4 finished size. So these are actually, like, this one is 2.5 by 4.5. Okay, for this one right here, but that finished size is going to be 2 by 4, and then same with this one. This is 2.5 by 3.5 that the ruler is, but that finished size is 1.5 by 3.5. So those are some rulers that you're going to need for that. Okay, so that's how we do half square triangles and our flying geese. Now let's go to our 1/4 square triangle. So our flying geese, our half square triangles are all going to go in our main block. Once you get those put together and ironed out, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a 5 by 5 grid. You're just going to lay those out and stitch them together. Being careful of your ironing instructions. I did do things a little bit opposite, and I'll explain that here for you. So for ironing these, okay, I told you, let me zoom back in here, that sorry, don't want to make you seasick there. Okay, so I ironed away from this dark so that these get ironed like this, okay? And the reason for that is this block right here, I know is going to go towards these flying geese, so I want these two opposite right here so that they nest nicely for me. And that's the reason that I did that. And then same with these little guys here, Okay, they're going to go towards the light because this flying geese goes that way. So that puts them opposite and it allows them to nest better. And so that's how all of these are going to mesh up. And so that's what I'm going to do, that all of the half square triangles are going to go towards the lighter piece so that when it matches up with my flying geese, it is correct. Okay. And then as far as these little guys go, like when we put these 4 patches together, it doesn't really matter. They're going to meet up with your flying geese. So as long as they're opposite how you iron them, then that is what matters there. Okay. And then same goes for our smaller block over here. You're going to do the same ironing pattern for it. And then it just goes together like a regular block. Now we have our quarter square triangle for our spacer that we're trying to make. And I use, and this pattern asks you to use a quarter square triangle ruler. There's other versions of this. This is kind of a multi ruler. You can do flying geese with it, you can do half square triangles, and you can do quarter square triangles, and you just have to follow the instructions for it. So I'll show you what I did. Still debating on whether or not I like it, and I'll tell you why. So what you do is you follow on the ruler. I want this finished size to be, now I gotta find the right one, an 8-inch finished square. Okay, so I needed a 4.5-inch strip in order to do this. So what you do is you lay your fabrics together with right sides together. Okay, and let me get this lined up here like it should be. I'm not actually going to cut this because I already have mine cut and I don't want to waste the fabric, but I'm going to show you. So you lay them out like this, okay? And then you take your ruler and you lay it across like this. So what happens is when I have a square bit of fabric, these are upside down, but you get the idea. Okay, so when I first do my first cut, then I lose this piece. This is waste here, okay? And so that's the piece that I don't like about this, is that this is a lot of waste for me when I'm trying to utilize every bit of fabric. I can get a square out of this or potentially use it for some smaller squares. So we'll see. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to save it. But I had to cut 2 of these. So you cut here, you flip your ruler around, and then you cut 1 more. Okay, so this would be really great if you had a lot of quarter square triangles that you're trying to do, so that you would use up the whole strip or most of the strip. Then that is definitely something that I would look at doing. But where I'm doing 1 quarter square triangle, it seems wasteful to me. But so does using a 9-inch square cut in diagonally and then having an extra one left over, which is what happened previously as well. So, pros and cons of everything that you do. So you just have to decide what works best for you. And then I'm going to take the excess of this and cut 3-inch squares out of it that I have not done yet. Now, once you have these triangles cut, so this is what you end up with, okay? So the fabric sat like this. So I cut here, here, and then here so that I have these 2 sets of triangles. Now, what I want to do is you want to just put these in your machine. You're going to sew along the same side. That's very, very important, that I don't want to sew this side on one and this side on the other, because then they're not going to mesh up the way that I want them to. Okay. Now, since I have this here, then I will open it up. These are about the same darkness, brightness, whatever you want to say. So I'm just going to pick a side and I'm going to iron, open it up, iron towards that same side on each one. Okay, so like on this, I have them just finger pressed towards the blue so that I then have a nice nesting seam. These are going opposite directions. And I am still on the bias. So remember, we cut these like this, so I am still on that bias. So you still have to be careful not to stretch these, especially as I go to do this seam here. But if I have them ironed correctly, okay, to the same sides, then when I flip them over, they're going to go opposite directions and I get this nice flat nesting seam that is going to sit a lot flatter in your quilt than if they go the same way and I have a lot more bulk there. So this helps alleviate some of that bulk, and then I'll be able to open it up like this. So that does give you another option to be able to do that quarter square triangle. Once I get these two together, I will want to make sure that it is squared up. I don't have extra on this one. It's not like my half square triangles. So if you do it the traditional method, you can oversize by 1/8 to 1/4 inch and be able to trim that up so that it is just your perfect size. That's especially helpful if you're not real confident in your scant 1/4 inch seams, or anytime you're working on the bias, because things do stretch a little bit. Even if you don't intend for them to, they can stretch a little bit. So we just want to be very careful with that, and you can have that little bit of wiggle room. Once we have all of those things done, then we can put our spacer together, and then we have our blocks together, and we'll just set them aside for putting that whole quilt together when we get to that point. I hope that these instructions help you. It does take time to go through and, figure out those changes that I want to do it the way that I prefer to do it. And I hope that this helps you feel more confident in your sewing and your quilting to be able to have a better product that you can be really, truly proud of. Whatever works for you, do it your way, be you. Do it the way that it comes out best for you, and that's okay. You don't have to do it my way. You can do it whatever way works for you, as long as you are happy with the outcome. That's what I want for you guys. I hope that you enjoy month 4 of Mountain Meadow, and I will see you next month for our next month, and then we're about halfway through with this quilt, so that's pretty awesome. Happy quilting.